Hey everybody, Agent of Doubt here, world's worst SJW White Knight, and tonight I've had a good night. I wasn't on the Breakfast Club for their usual Saturday night show because I was out with family doing a social distanced look at all the Christmas lights in town, and some of which you actually have to pay to see this year because they've repurposed certain areas like Bandimere Speedway and Waterworld to be just Christmas light shows that you have to pay to get into because, we're all adapting and creating new business ventures to get through this year. But it was nice, and, part of that, of course, was touched by the pandemic in that we were social distanced from everybody else within the confines of the car, looking at lights that were nicely syncopated to the music, you know. But still, there's that stain of the pandemic on it, you know. We got back, said our goodbyes to the small group that was visiting us, also family, and I sat down, look at Twitter, and I see that Pennsylvania State Representative Mike Reese has died at 42 of a brain aneurysm, apparently. And so I'm talking with Misty, and I'm like, you know, people who are 42 years old, they don't usually die of brain aneurysms. But that is something that is one of the end stage results of COVID-19 when somebody dies from that. And I was wondering, if Mike Reese had COVID-19 in the past, would he have told the public? Because he's a Republican, and that would go against the Republican narrative. It hurts their political chances the more that COVID is mentioned because they suck at containing it. And so, yeah, it's unfortunately it's a political thing, right? So I was wondering how many of our politicians have gotten COVID so far, and how many have died, right? And so, luckily for me, there's actually a list on Ballotpedia of all of the politicians that have died from the coronavirus, that have got the coronavirus, and that have quarantined just to be safe because they were exposed to somebody who later was found to have gotten the coronavirus. They have a, an ongoing list that gets updated every Monday. So I was wondering, could this list actually be used to prove that Republicans and their stance about the coronavirus not being as serious as it needs to be, could this be killing Republicans more? And could this be making them catch it more? And so the first part I'm going to go over is the elected officials that have died from the coronavirus. Okay? So on the federal level, we've got two. We've got Luke Letlow, who was Republican, he was congressman-elect. He hadn't actually gotten into office yet, but Luke Letlow in Louisiana died of coronavirus. The other one on the federal level was Judge Stephen F. Williams. He's a judge, so he doesn't have a political party that's out there, but he was a D.C. judge. On the state level, however, this is where it gets interesting. So we have our state politicians that have died from coronavirus. We have Roy Edwards. He was in Wyoming, and he was a member of the Republican Party. Uh, he was in the Wyoming House of Representatives. Uh, Johnny Lee Baines, he was a judge in New York. No political party mentioned there. Uh, A. Benton Chafin, he's a member of the Republican Party in Virginia. There's Dick Hinch, he was a Republican in the New Hampshire House of Representatives. There is Jerry Ralph, he is a Republican, or was a Republican in the Minnesota State Senate. There's Reggie Bagala, he was a Republican in the Louisiana House of Representatives. Getting the picture here so far? There was Bob Glanzer. He was a Republican in the South Dakota House of Representatives. There was Noach Deer. I'm going to say his name is Noach Deer. Yeah, he was a judge in New York. No political affiliation for judges. Marnie Zhang, who was in St. Paul, Minnesota. She was a school board representative, and that's another job, just like judges, that you don't list your political affiliation. Lillian Blancas in El Paso County, Texas, was a judge, and no political party associated with judgeships. Benny Napoleon, he was Wayne County Sheriff. The county that is like around Detroit. Benny Napoleon, he was a Democrat. We also have Michael Youn. He was New Jersey City Council, and he listed himself as nonpartisan. And Nancy Stevenson, who was a judge in Georgia. So that's all of our deaths from coronavirus of elected officials, right? Those are the deaths. I named one Democrat. All the others that I could tell the political affiliation of, they were Republicans. Now, there were a few that you don't know. You could maybe look at their decisions and make a judgment on that, whether they were conservative or liberal. But by and large, you just heard me talk about a lot of dead Republicans. So, here's the thing. The next list on Ballotpedia is a list of people who got the virus, and there's 50 of them. And it is not as stark of a difference between the Democrats and the Republicans in that list. And I would posit that the reason why is because there are Republican officials who are getting the coronavirus and hiding it. There were a few that didn't show up to debates in 2020, where you could maybe assume that there's a reason why they didn't show up to debates. There's, maybe that one debate was during a time when they didn't want to be, found out as having had health issues. Along with the blood clot's ability to create brain aneurysms that could kill somebody and not have them publicly being called a coronavirus victim. You could have a senator who has particularly purple hands from the blood clotting issues that the coronavirus could create. You could have all sorts of things that are plainly obvious But if they don't come out and say that they had the coronavirus, then we don't know. They have confidentiality for their medical records. The only way we know, really, is if they come out and say it themselves. And they have a propensity to hide the truth. And this propensity is made clear by the proportion of dead elected officials that we have who are Republican versus the proportion of Democrats and Republicans in the column of got the coronavirus and told the public. There's a big difference between those ratios with one elected Democrat sheriff in Michigan who died, and all the rest are Republicans of all of our elected officials that have died of it. And then, not as clear of a difference with the open about getting it crowd. So it's to me, it's just very illustrative of how we never should have let this thing become a political issue where denying the ramifications of the coronavirus and denying that it even exists is a virtue to one of our political parties. That shit has become our downfall, and here I am in 2021, still socially distanced, doing things because, the pandemic still touches every aspect of my life in some way or another. Y'all take care.